10 best must-watch faith-based old Hollywood movies of all time. In Hollywood's golden age, faith wasn't just mentioned in movies, it shaped cinema's most unforgettable stories. Before content warnings and algorithmic recommendations, filmmakers created masterpieces that explored spirituality with raw authenticity rarely seen in today's sanitized blockbusters. These weren't religious films. They were cinematic monuments that happened to take faith seriously. I've uncovered the 10 most extraordinary spiritual classics from old Hollywood that still move audiences to tears, regardless of their personal beliefs. And number 3, that controversial masterpiece was initially condemned by religious leaders until they realized its profound message had been completely misunderstood, proving that sometimes the most spiritual films come disguised as blasphemy. What makes these films different from today's faith-based cinema? Is it just superior craftsmanship from legendary directors, or something deeper about how Golden Age Hollywood approached spiritual themes without fear? Stay with me, because these films reveal a shocking truth. The most powerful spiritual stories don't offer easy answers. They invite us into life's deepest mysteries with both doubt and wonder. By the end of this video, you'll understand why these classics touched audiences so deeply then, and why they continue to move viewers searching for meaning in our increasingly cynical world. Number 1, The Song of Bernadette, 1943, When Heaven Chooses the Least Likely Messenger. For those who believe in God, no explanation is necessary. For those who do not believe, no explanation is possible. These words open The Song of Bernadette, immediately setting stakes higher than most faith films ever dare. Based on the true story of 14-year-old peasant Bernadette Soubirous, who claimed to see visions of the Virgin Mary in 1858 France, the film does something revolutionary. It refuses to tell you what to believe. Jennifer Jones won an Academy Award portraying this unlikely visionary, a sickly, uneducated girl facing ridicule from civil authorities, skepticism from church officials, and even doubt from her own family. When asked why the apparition chose her, Bernadette delivers the film's most devastating line. "She did not choose me because I was worthy, but because I was unworthy." A moment that silences even the most cynical viewers. What elevates this film beyond religious propaganda is its psychological complexity. We never actually see the Virgin Mary, only Bernadette's radiant face as she experiences something transformative. This brilliant artistic choice forces each viewer to make their own judgment about what's happening, creating a far more personal engagement than being told what miracle to believe in. The film's most compelling antagonist isn't the town atheist, played with surprising nuance by Vincent Price, but the skeptical Catholic clergy who initially view Bernadette with suspicion and political calculation. By showing religious authorities as obstacles rather than automatic allies, the film acknowledges institutional religion's frequent failure to recognize authentic spiritual experience, a critique that makes its faith message more credible, not less. The Song of Bernadette became the 4th highest-grossing film of 1943, precisely because it respects viewers enough to wrestle with doubt instead of preaching certainty. It shows that true faith often means standing against prevailing opinions and institutional powers, a message that resonates whether you believe in miracles or not. Number 2, The 10 Commandments, 1956, Freedom Through Faith. No film fused spiritual conviction with jaw-dropping spectacle like Cecil B. DeMille's final masterpiece. Using 14,000 extras and pioneering special effects that still impress today, The 10 Commandments transformed the Exodus story into a universal struggle for human dignity against tyranny. Charlton Heston's commanding performance as Moses anchors this epic, but what truly distinguishes the film is how it frames a biblical narrative as a timeless conflict between freedom and oppression. DeMille opens by appearing on screen personally to establish his intent. The theme of this picture is whether men ought to be ruled by God's law or whether they are to be ruled by the whims of a dictator. This framing gave the ancient story immediate relevance to Cold War audiences while elevating it beyond mere religious pageantry. The film's centerpiece, The Parting of the Red Sea, cost a staggering $2 million alone, equivalent to $21 million today. Created using large water tanks and revolutionary optical printing, this sequence represents the film's central message, that faith can literally move mountains when human courage aligns with divine purpose. Moses' identity crisis provides the story's psychological core. Raised as Egyptian royalty but born a Hebrew slave, his journey from privileged prince to humble shepherd to reluctant liberator offers a compelling portrait of spiritual awakening that transcends specific religious traditions. His transformation from man of privilege to man of purpose remains the film's most resonant element for contemporary viewers. The 10 Commandments dominated the box office in 1956, and continues its annual television broadcast tradition today, making it perhaps the most viewed faith-based film in history. As DeMille himself said, "Man has made his way up from the primeval mud by reaching for the stars. This picture strives to show that it is not by bread alone that we may survive, but by faith, courage, and freedom." Number 3. The Seventh Seal, 1957, When God Goes Silent. No film in history has confronted spiritual crisis more honestly than Ingmar Bergman's medieval masterpiece. Set during the Black Death, it follows a disillusioned knight who challenges death himself to a chess match while searching for evidence of God in a world of suffering. Max von Sydow's Antonius Bloch articulates the spiritual agony many believers experience, but few films dare acknowledge. "I call out to you in the darkness, but no one seems to be there." Rather than offering cheap comfort, Bergman invites viewers to inhabit this existential struggle with unflinching integrity. The film's title references Revelation 8:1, "When he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour." A biblical moment when even divine communication pauses. Upon release, religious leaders condemned the film as blasphemous for its portrayal of spiritual doubt. The irony? It eventually became recognized as one of cinema's most profound explorations of authentic faith. As theologian Paul Tillich noted, the film brilliantly depicts the courage that takes doubt and meaninglessness into itself, acknowledging that wrestling with God's silence may itself be an act of profound spirituality. The film's most transcendent moment occurs when Bloch encounters a young family of traveling performers sharing a simple meal. Their genuine connection provides Bloch a glimpse of meaning he cannot find through theological questioning, suggesting that while intellectual certainty remains elusive, grace still appears through human kindness and simple joys. The famous final scene, the dance of death leading characters over a hillside, is often misinterpreted as nihilistic. Yet crucially, the innocent family escapes this fate, suggesting that while death comes for us all, love and beauty offer meaningful transcendence, even in a world where God seems absent. The Seventh Seal stands as an ironic miracle in cinema history, a film initially considered sacrilegious that now offers deeper spiritual insight than countless explicitly religious productions. It remains essential viewing for anyone who has ever experienced doubt as part of their faith journey. Number 4. Ben-Hur, 1959, When Revenge Meets Redemption. Almost at the moment he died, I was set free. I felt his voice take the sword out of my hand. This confession captures the spiritual heart of William Wyler's monumental epic that won an unprecedented 11 Academy Awards. While most viewers remember its spectacular 9-minute chariot race, the film's true power lies in its transformation story, how a man consumed by justified vengeance finds redemption through an encounter with Christ. Charlton Heston's Judah Ben-Hur, a wealthy Jewish prince falsely accused of assassination, endures years as a galley slave while nursing hatred for his betrayer. The parallel narrative of Jesus, whose face is never shown on screen, eventually intersects with Judah's story with soul-shattering consequences. What distinguishes Ben-Hur from typical religious films is its psychological realism in portraying spiritual change. Judah's transformation isn't instantaneous or simplistic. Even after Jesus gives him water as a condemned prisoner, a moment of grace that sustains him through years of suffering, Judah remains fixated on revenge. Only after experiencing the emptiness of vengeance fulfilled does he become receptive to forgiveness. The famous chariot race serves as more than spectacular entertainment. It represents Judah achieving his revenge against Messala, yet finding it hollow, a crucial spiritual turning point showing that even justified vengeance leaves the soul empty. The film's approach to portraying Christ proves remarkably effective. By showing Jesus only from behind or at a distance, Wyler creates reverence while focusing on how others respond to his presence. This technique allows viewers of different faith backgrounds to engage with the story without feeling preached at. In the film's final act, as Judah witnesses the crucifixion, his hardened heart finally breaks. The miraculous healing of his leprosy-afflicted mother and sister parallels his own inner healing from hatred. This concluding sequence elevates what might have been simply an adventure film into a profound meditation on how divine grace can redirect a life consumed by righteous anger, a message that resonates across religious boundaries. Number 5. A Man for All Seasons, 1966, standing alone against the world. When a man takes an oath, he's holding his own self in his own hands, like water, and if he opens his fingers, then he needn't hope to find himself again. This line captures the moral heart of A Man for All Seasons, the story of Sir Thomas More's fatal refusal to approve King Henry VIII's break with the Catholic Church. While technically a historical drama, its exploration of conscience over compromise makes it one of cinema's most profound spiritual works. Paul Scofield delivers a performance of extraordinary depth as More, presenting a man whose religious convictions aren't abstract beliefs, but the foundation of his very identity. Unlike many faith-based films that portray religious characters as simplistic saints, A Man for All Seasons shows More as intellectually brilliant, politically savvy, and deeply loving toward his family, making his ultimate sacrifice all the more meaningful. The film's most devastating scene occurs when More's beloved wife Alice visits him in prison, demanding to understand why he cannot simply say words he doesn't believe to save himself. His explanation, that oath-breaking would destroy his very self, articulates how religious conviction can form the core of personal identity in a way that transcends even survival instinct. Director Fred Zinnemann creates visual poetry that reinforces the film's themes. The Thames River appears repeatedly as a symbol of time flowing inexorably forward, while More's garden represents his inner spiritual sanctuary. As pressure mounts on More to compromise, the film's color palette gradually darkens, reflecting his narrowing options. A Man for All Seasons also brilliantly explores the various ways people justify moral compromise. More's friend the Duke of Norfolk pleads, "But Thomas, look at those names. You know these men. Can't you do what I did and come with us for fellowship?" This appeal to conformity as justification for abandoning principle remains powerfully relevant in our own era of institutional pressure and cancel culture. More's final words before execution, "I die His Majesty's good servant, but God's first," represent the film's ultimate affirmation of spiritual integrity against political expediency. This hierarchy of loyalties continues to challenge viewers of all faiths to consider what principles they would die rather than compromise. Number 6. The Passion of Joan of Arc, 1928. No film in history has done more with a single face. Carl Theodor Dreyer's silent masterpiece relies almost entirely on close-ups of actress Renee Falconetti to convey Joan of Arc's spiritual journey during her trial and execution. The result is so transcendent that critics have called it not just a great film but a form of religious experience itself. Falconetti, in her only film role, delivers what many consider cinema's greatest performance. Her portrayal of Joan combines vulnerability, terror, certainty, and eventual transcendence as the young visionary faces her inquisitors. Dreyer's extreme close-ups create an intimacy that makes Joan's inner spiritual experience viscerally real to viewers nearly a century later. What elevates this film above conventional religious narratives is its focus on the cost of divine calling rather than its rewards. Joan's faithfulness brings her not worldly success, but suffering and death. Yet the film presents this outcome not as defeat, but as spiritual victory, a perspective deeply rooted in Christian theology, but rarely portrayed so honestly on screen. The film is extraordinarily faithful to historical records, with much dialogue taken directly from Joan's trial transcripts. This historical accuracy gives the spiritual drama authenticity while highlighting how institutional religion can sometimes oppose authentic spiritual experience. The clerics who condemn Joan represent corrupted religious authority, while she embodies direct divine connection. Dreyer's visual approach creates a disorienting, dreamlike quality that suggests we're seeing beyond physical reality into spiritual truth. By violating conventional filmmaking rules, particularly continuity editing, he creates a sense that normal time and space have been suspended in favor of a higher reality. The film's original negative was destroyed in a fire, and for decades, Dreyer's masterpiece was seen only in inferior versions. Then, miraculously, a complete print was discovered in a janitor's closet in a Norwegian mental hospital in 1981. This resurrection of a lost masterpiece seems fitting for a film about faith persisting beyond apparent destruction. Though silent and nearly a century old, The Passion of Joan of Arc feels startlingly modern in its psychological intimacy and spiritual intensity. Its portrayal of faith as something experienced through, rather than despite suffering, offers a profound alternative to prosperity-focused religious messaging, making it essential viewing for those seeking cinema that engages with faith's deepest questions. Number 7. It's a Wonderful Life, 1946. Divine Intervention in the Ordinary. Strange, isn't it? Each man's life touches so many other lives. When he isn't around, he leaves an awful hole, doesn't he? This observation from Clarence the Angel captures the spiritual heart of Frank Capra's beloved classic, a film that finds divine purpose within seemingly small lives. Initially a box office disappointment, it became one of America's most cherished films precisely because it discovers transcendent meaning in ordinary existence. James Stewart delivers his most soul-bearing performance as George Bailey, a man who repeatedly sacrifices his dreams to help others, only to face financial ruin and suicidal despair on Christmas Eve. His rescue comes through Clarence, an angel seeking to earn his wings, who shows George how profoundly different his town would have been without him. What many viewers miss is how genuinely dark the film becomes before its uplifting conclusion. George experiences authentic spiritual crisis, crying out in a bar, "Dear Father in heaven, I'm not a praying man, but if you're up there and you can hear me, show me the way." This raw desperation gives the subsequent divine response authentic weight. The alternative reality sequence, Pottersville instead of Bedford Falls, isn't just narrative cleverness, but a theological statement about how individual choices shape collective spiritual health. Without George's sacrificial presence, the town becomes corrupted by greed and exploitation. This communal dimension adds depth beyond individual salvation, suggesting that spiritual well-being has social implications. It's a Wonderful Life explores a fundamental spiritual paradox. George achieves greatness precisely by surrendering his ambitions for greatness. His seemingly small life in Bedford Falls, filled with compromises and deferred dreams, ultimately touches more lives than the global adventures he originally desired. This vision of sanctified ordinary existence, finding divine purpose within limited circumstances, offers spiritual depth beneath the film's sentimental surface. Capra himself described the film's message in explicitly spiritual terms. There is a purpose in life far greater than ourselves. We all have the ability and the responsibility to help each other, not because we want to go to heaven, but because heaven is created when we help each other. By showing divine intervention working through human relationships rather than supernatural spectacle, Capra created a spiritual film that speaks to believers and skeptics alike, suggesting that the most profound miracles often happen in the most ordinary places. Number 8. The Gospel According to St. Matthew, 1964, when an atheist captured Christ's true message. The most faithful and spiritually powerful film ever made about Jesus came from the most unlikely source, Italian Marxist filmmaker Pier Paolo Pasolini, an atheist and gay man who scandalized Catholic Italy with his radical politics and sexuality. The resulting masterpiece transformed how religious cinema could approach sacred stories. Pasolini cast Spanish economics student Enrique Irizarry as Jesus, avoiding both Hollywood handsomeness and sanctimonious piety. This Christ is intense, urgent, and occasionally angry, closer to the biblical figure who overturned temple tables than the gentle Jesus of conventional religious films. Yet there's profound spirituality in this portrayal that emerges from its very human authenticity. What makes Pasolini's approach revolutionary is his decision to film Matthew's gospel directly, without added dialogue or psychological explanations. This literalism creates an almost documentary quality that allows the spiritual message to emerge without melodramatic embellishment or sentimental manipulation. The miracles are presented matter-of-fact without special effects or dramatic buildup, as if Pasolini's camera simply happened to be present when they occurred. Shooting in impoverished southern Italian villages, Pasolini found faces that look as if they stepped directly out of medieval religious paintings, creating visual continuity with Christianity's artistic tradition while capturing the poverty that shaped Jesus' ministry. This combination creates a unique aesthetic that feels both ancient and immediate. The true miracle of this film is how Pasolini, despite his atheism, captured the spiritual essence of Matthew's gospel more faithfully than many Christian filmmakers. By focusing on Jesus' teachings about the poor, his challenges to authority, and his solidarity with the marginalized, Pasolini highlights dimensions of Christ's message often downplayed in more conventional religious films. The Vatican itself recognized the film's spiritual power, with the Catholic Film Office naming it the best film about Jesus ever made. Pope Francis has cited it as his favorite Jesus film, noting how it captures Christ's gaze of mercy even in its most challenging moments. Pasolini dedicated the film to Pope John XXIII, who had reached out to non-believers and initiated reforms in the Catholic Church. This gesture from a gay Marxist filmmaker to a pope symbolizes the film's remarkable ability to speak across ideological divisions through artistic integrity and textual faithfulness. An ironic miracle, really, that an atheist captured Christ's message more reverently than many believers ever did. Number 9. The Diary of a Country Priest, 1951, Faith Without Feelings. Robert Bresson's masterpiece follows a young, sickly priest assigned to his first parish in rural France, where he faces hostility, indifference, and his own spiritual emptiness. It presents perhaps cinema's most honest portrayal of faith as persistent commitment rather than emotional satisfaction. Claude Ledoux plays the unnamed priest with haunting vulnerability, his gaunt face registering every moment of pain, doubt, and occasional grace. Suffering from stomach cancer, though he doesn't know the diagnosis, he subsists on bread soaked in wine, an unintentional Eucharistic parallel that suggests he's unconsciously embodying Christ's suffering. What makes this film essential viewing is its unflinching portrayal of spiritual aridity. The young priest rarely feels God's presence, yet continues his ministry through what St. John of the Cross called the dark night of the soul. His journal entry, "God is not a torturer. He wants us to be merciful with ourselves," suggests that self-forgiveness might be the first step toward experiencing divine grace after prolonged spiritual darkness. The film's most powerful scene occurs when the priest counsels a countess who has become embittered after her son's death. Their conversation becomes a spiritual breakthrough for both, with the priest speaking words of challenge and comfort that seem to come not from himself, but through him. This moment of authentic ministry amid his general feelings of inadequacy suggests that divine work happens not despite, but through human limitation. Bresson's austere filmmaking style, using non-professional actors and stripping away conventional emotional cues, creates a spiritual atmosphere rather than merely telling a religious story. His camera lingers on hands, faces, and everyday objects, finding transcendence in material reality rather than through supernatural spectacle. In the film's final moments, as the priest dies in a friend's apartment, he whispers, "All is grace." This simple statement, coming after so much suffering and apparent failure, offers the film's most profound theological insight that even experiences of abandonment and darkness may ultimately be encompassed within divine love. By portraying faith as persistent commitment rather than emotional certainty, Diary of a Country Priest speaks powerfully to contemporary spiritual experience in an age of doubt and institutional religious decline. Its vision of ministry as presence rather than achievement remains particularly relevant in a culture obsessed with measurable success. Number 10. Babette's Feast, 1987. The Meal That Healed a Broken Faith. Gabriel Axel's Danish masterpiece centers on something that seems decidedly non-spiritual, a lavish French dinner. Yet it offers cinema's most beautiful parable about how grace enters the world through beauty, generosity, and shared pleasure. The story follows two pious sisters who maintain their deceased father's small Lutheran sect on Denmark's remote coast. When Babette, a refugee from political violence in France, arrives seeking work as their servant, they have no idea she was once Paris's greatest chef. After winning a lottery, Babette spends her entire fortune preparing an extraordinary French feast for the congregation's anniversary. The film's spiritual genius lies in how this sumptuous meal transforms the dwindling religious community. Years of doctrinal disputes and asceticism have left them joyless and divided, but through Babette's sacrificial offering, they rediscover communion with each other and a sensual appreciation that doesn't contradict spiritual life, but completes it. What makes Babette's Feast essential viewing is its gentle challenge to religious dualism that separates spiritual and physical experience. The meal becomes embodied grace, suggesting that God might be encountered not just through scripture and prayer, but through taste, beauty, and shared pleasure. As one character realizes during the feast, righteousness and bliss shall kiss one another. Director Gabriel Axel films the preparation and consumption of the meal with reverent attention, elevating cooking to a form of devotion. Babette's careful preparation of each dish becomes a liturgy, while the communal table suggests Eucharistic fellowship. Without preaching, the film presents artistic creation and sensual enjoyment as pathways to transcendence. The film's most profound spiritual insight comes through Babette's sacrifice. We eventually learn she was head chef at Paris's famous Café Anglais and has spent her entire 10,000 franc lottery win, her only chance to return to her former life, on this single meal for people who barely comprehend what they're experiencing. This Christ-like offering, giving all she has for the nourishment and healing of others, embodies the self-emptying love that lies at the heart of Christian theology. Pope Francis has cited Babette's Feast as his favorite film, noting how it represents the idea of gratuitousness, grace freely given without expectation of return. The film suggests that spiritual life need not be austere or joyless, that pleasure, beauty, and sensual experience can be pathways to divine encounter rather than distractions from it. This quiet masterpiece offers healing to viewers from traditions that have sometimes emphasized spiritual discipline at the expense of embodied joy, reminding us that the divine often appears in the midst of our most ordinary pleasures. These 10 extraordinary films reveal why old Hollywood's approach to faith-based storytelling continues to move viewers across generations and belief systems. Unlike many contemporary religious films that preach to the converted, these classics use masterful filmmaking, complex characters, and nuanced themes to explore spiritual questions in ways that engage both believers and skeptics. What distinguishes these films is their courage to present faith authentically, with all its doubts, costs, and failures alongside its transformative power. From Bergman's wrestling with divine silence, to Bresson's portrait of spiritual emptiness, to Capra's vision of ordinary grace, these filmmakers understood that honest spiritual storytelling requires acknowledging faith's difficulties as well as its consolations. In our increasingly divided world, these classic faith-based films remind us that the most profound spiritual questions transcend denominational boundaries and political tribes. They invite viewers of all beliefs to consider what gives life meaning, how we should treat one another, and whether there might be something transcendent beyond what we can immediately perceive. Great films, like great faith, don't provide easy answers. They invite us into deeper questions. These 10 classics continue to guide us on that journey with more wisdom, beauty, and honesty than 1,000 modern sermons. What faith-based classic would you add to this list? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this exploration of spirituality in classic cinema, please hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell to catch our next journey through Hollywood's golden age.